Good morning, I'm Aaron Heiser at Maker's Leather Supply, and I have spent all day making a video and then deleted the intro. So here's my makeshift intro from my kitchen table. Anyway, today's video is the Fringy Cowhide bag. Alrighty, we're going to go through all the steps to make one of these, and it's going to be a good time. This is the one I made for my wife. It's a little bit more special. I did stars and stripes and stuff on the back. I did a really big, what's that called? Shoulder strap with a gunslinger stitch line pattern on it. And anyway, this is a new template from Maker's Leather Supply. It is definitely worth looking at. It is a very simple build, but a very popular style. So, let's get to it. Alright, so this template is super simple to use. It's just a few parts. I cut two pieces already out of veg tan, anywhere from 5 to 7 ounces. Okay, and I did these in a different video, the video showing how to do the hand cut basket weave pattern. So if you want to see how that was done, you can reference that video. But I cut them out of using that template piece right there. Okay, now two other template pieces. This one's going to be for all your fringe right here. We'll set that aside for a moment. And this one you're going to cut, if you want to do this out of cowhide, you know, like a hair on hide, you need at least one from this template. Normally I do the cowhide on one side and then just regular leather on the back side, something smooth. I don't like a lot of cowhide. I realize that I'm not the consumer, the end consumer of this product, but I think it looks better if it's got a smooth side on it and then a cowhide side. So I'm going to cut one of these out of this cowhide right here, and then I'm going to cut another one out of just some smooth bag leather. Okay? When I cut things like that, normally I use one of these like rotary style cutters. I'll hold my template real nice and still, find the spot I want to use. You know, I want to make sure it doesn't have any defects. Look on the back. A lot of cowhides will have holes that have been patched. This little piece does not, but you can find them on the back. Rarely will you see them from the front. Okay, so I want some of that white in there, so I'm going to put it about right there, and I'm going to cut it out. And I want to make sure it stays nice and still. I'm not worried about cutting these little areas out. I'll do that in a minute. I'm going to go ahead and cut out the main shape of it so that I don't have to worry about the template moving on me, and then I'll cut those little areas out last. I don't like cowhide mostly just because of the mess it leaves on the desk. You know, when I'm done here, this will look like a barbershop floor from cutting through all this hair. Okay. Feels like it skipped a spot there. And then especially if you have a long-haired cowhide like this one, most of it's pretty short, but down here at the bottom it's getting kind of long. It was a belly section of this cowhide. So I'll go ahead and pull my template off there. And I'll shake this off because what I've got here is my dust buster that I will take care of all this with. Oh man, it's getting in my coffee. I hate that. Alright, so I shake it off real good so it's not all over my floor and everything else. And then, like I said, I've got my dust buster out of my wood shop here, and I'm going to take care of all this, and then we'll come back to cutting. Alright, got all that mess cleaned up, and now I'm going to make a little bit more mess as I cut out these last little sections here, okay? You got several different tools. Since it's just a small area, I'm going to use this little knife here, and cut that out, those little L shapes. Just like that. Need to break another piece off this blade. I'm not as sharp as I need to be here. If I'd used my scalpel, I'd probably already be done with this part. we go. All right, so there's that. Now I'm going to cut the exact same thing out of the same leather that I'm going to use for my fringe. Okay, and what I've got here is some of that Herman Oak waterproof leather that we have, the Herman Oak 1881. I just figure it's a nice, pretty dark brown. It's soft, yet very strong. And that's what I'm going to cut my fringe and my back piece out of. So when I come back, I'm going to already have my back piece cut out, and we'll start talking about fringe. Alright, so here I have a front piece and a back piece, and they complement each other well. And after I put the tooled pieces on them, they're going to look even better. Okay? Like that. But we got a lot of fringe to cut out before we get to that point. Okay? So what I'm going to do is, on camera, I will cut out one fringe panel and begin to cut out the actual fringe. And then I'll probably like fast forward and make it really fast that I'm doing the rest of the fringe. But anyway, that's this piece right here. Okay, I'm going to cut it out of the same stuff I made the back out of. That way everything matches up really nicely. I really should have just pre-cut some of this out of this big old side of leather here. A while ago when I got that first piece cut out, I knocked my pipe off the table and it went everywhere, and I had to vacuum it up too. Luckily I already have my vacuum out, huh? So anyway, I'm just going to cut out one of these rectangles here, and I'll show you how I do the fringe for this bag. Now, I'm pretty conservative with my fringe because I hate doing fringe. I don't like the look of it. I don't like anything about it. But again, I am not the end consumer. I am just somebody that likes to make stuff. I made one of these for my wife for 4th of July, and she absolutely loves this bag. That being said, she also, see, pulls everything off my desk. That being said, she also is not a huge fringe person. She likes shorter fringe. And this was kind of designed with a very moderate taste of fringe in it, okay? So the fringe on it's only going to be this long on the sides, and then actually this exact same template is going to be the bottom fringe, and it will be widthwise instead of lengthwise. Okay, so on the sides I do the fringe lengthwise on off this template, and then on the bottom I do it widthwise. That way it's not hanging down to your dadgum ankles when you're trying to walk. I know that that's the style for some, but yeah. So anyway, let me get this leather out of the way and I'll show you how I do this. Alright, I am going to use my gridded ruler here to cut this, okay? But the first thing I'm going to do is take anything. It can be a piece of acrylic, it can be a piece of other leather, something like that. I want to tape it across the top so my knife knows where to stop and make everything nice and even. Now, I happen to have a plethora of rulers, so what I'm going to do is put some double-sided tape on this ruler and use it. Got some 1/4-inch tape here, and this is one of the ones, I do make a fringe template, okay? It is not quite as long as the fringe is on this bag though. That's why if you're watching and you're familiar with our store, you're probably like, why isn't he just using this fringe template? It's a little bit shorter than this bag, and so yeah, that's why I'm not using it. Okay, so I'll take the backing off the double-sided tape. Now if this tape, when I peel it later, ruins the finish on the leather, that's okay, because this is going to be inside the seam of the bag. Now I'm going to take this ruler and just set it down about 1/4 of an inch or so down, maybe even 3/8. There we go. Now my knife will not accidentally cut too high. Okay, it's stuck up there, it's not going to move, we're good to go. Now, this is how we manually cut fringe if we don't have a template. Okay, these grid lines are 1/8 of an inch, and so I will put it to where I want 1/4-inch fringe, which is 2 grid lines, right? I'll put it right there, and then I'm going to use that same rotary knife and just cut all the way up to that piece up there. Okay, and then I'm going to move it over. I'll kind of move that a little bit just so I can see where my line is again. And I'm going to move it 2 more grid lines. And I'm going to cut it. Now this ruler has a mark on the back of it, a scratch or something, where it's kind of confusing me, so I'm going to grab one of the others. Again, I have 50 of these rulers laying around, so not a big deal for me. But anyway, this is how I do it. Sometimes I'll use one of those big quilting squares if it's a large area. But on this one, I'm just going to use our ruler, and I'm going to keep going all the way across, making sure I stay straight and don't get it all crooked and crazy. Whoop, that didn't cut all the way through at the bottom here. Yeah, and I'm going to go all the way across. Okay, and again, I'm going to fast forward the video. You'll see me do it very, very quickly. Okay, so there's my first piece of fringe, awful fringy. Okay, again, I'm going to make one more exactly like this, but then the last one I'm going to turn it this way and cut the fringe this way. Okay, that way I have 2 long pieces of fringe, 1 shorter piece of fringe that's wider. Okay, so there it is. I'll pull it off my ruler there. And I'll just leave that tape on there because that'll help me put it in the bag later. So when I come back, we'll have all 3 pieces of fringe cut. Alright, so after quite a bit of reminding me why I don't like fringe, we have our 3 pieces cut. And again, I'm going to repeat it one more time. We've got 2 that are narrow and long, and then we've got 1 that is wider but shorter. And this one will go across the bottom. Okay? So I just turned the template sideways to make this one, but I turned it lengthwise or tallwise to make these 2. So on the purse, these are going to be on the sides, or this one's going to be on the bottom, and these 2 will be on the sides. Okay, like so. And then let's just find the piece. We'll just kind of lay it out here so we can get a real good idea of what we're doing. Okay. And then I can't find my tool pieces. There they are. It's going to look like that. Okay? It's going to be pretty, I promise. Now, I do it this way because, again, I don't want the long fringe at the bottom, but also, like, when I sew all this together, this fringe hanging down will be, or appear to be, the same length as this shorter fringe at the bottom. Okay? So, now, we need to start prepping this thing to put together because we are more than halfway done now that all this crap is cut out. Okay, I'm going to throw this fringe over here in my chair. Now, the first thing I need to do is on these pieces right here, I need to burnish inside my handle right there. And then also, actually I'm not going to do inside the handle just yet, but I am going to burnish this bottom part here, the scalloped edge. Alright, and the reason I want to burnish that now is because we're about to sew it onto here, and once that's done, I won't get the opportunity to do it afterward. I mean, you can't burnish up against hair on, you're going to make a mess. Okay, so I'll do one of these on camera, and then we'll do the other one off camera. So I'm going to use a number 2 edger here, depending on what brand you're using, a number 2 might be a little large, but this is a pretty tiny edger right here. This is one of our Maker's brand tools, and yeah. It's always a challenge to go around the outside radius with an edger, but it's all in the hand. There we go. Now the back side. Okay, now I'm going to take some dark brown dye here. Grab me a little dauber. Okay, and I'm sure you've seen me do this trick, but I'm going to burn my dauber so that I don't have big fuzzies and stuff to get crazy with the dye. Okay, so I burned it and it's all charred. I'm going to put it over my trash can here and just knock that charring off with my finger. Okay, it's kind of like a marshmallow. Doesn't smell near as nice, doesn't taste near as nice. Take my word for it. Okay. Got some dye here. Looking to see if just opening that bottle got dye all over my hands. Sometimes it does. Okay, I'm going to dye that edge. There we go, just like that. Set this aside because I still have to do the other side in a minute. All right, I'm going to use token oil because it's what I've got sitting on my desk here, and a piece of canvas. For anybody that's never used token oil, it is really nice. I understand that a can of it being $9, it's not the most budget-friendly compound there is, but that little can should last you quite a while, and it burnishes things that I can't get other compounds to burnish, such as some of the exotics and stuff like that. So I'm just putting it on here with my finger. You can use a dauber, there's a billion ways to put it on, but I'm just using my finger because I don't want to reach for anything else and waste more of the video time. Okay, get a good little coating on there. I'm going to use my finger and wipe the excess off. Wipe it on the bottom of my desk where you would find lots of dye and everything else I've wiped off of stuff. Okay, close this up and get it out of the way. Okay, now I'm just going to burnish it with this piece of canvas here. With token oil, you can also use like a wooden slicker or something like that, but I do like to burnish with canvas. It's kind of my favorite. For years, I would just use the handle of my edger. Once I was done edging, I'd flip it around, start using the handle. Works great. Didn't need to buy a fancy wooden thingy-majig for it. But token oil is a real quick burnish too, especially on veg tan. It does not take long to get a decent little edge. Especially, I mean, this is single ply. It's not that hard. I'm not trying to marry up two edges to make them look like one here. If I was, there'd be some sanding involved and other stuff. Alright, so that's good enough. Now, I'm going to go ahead and do that on the other piece. But I'll show you where this goes. This is just going to go right up here against the top of this. And the first thing I'm going to do is sew just the top and the bottom and around the handle. Okay, and once I've done all that, then I can cut out that handle out of the bag itself. But there's no reason to cut it out beforehand, because you want to make sure it lines up really well, and the best way to do that is to sew it together, then cut that out. Okay, so I'll be right back. Alright, so here we are at the Cobra Class 18 sewing machine. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to tape these down as best I can. It'll be very difficult on the one with the hair on, but we'll save it for last. I do have my maker's mark. I want that to kind of be on the front, so I'm going to put it on the hair on side, and then this side is plain, so I'll just do it. I'll tape this one on to it, okay? I could glue it, but since the other side is hair on and it's not going to glue, I'm just going to use the tape, okay? So just a little strip here at the top, another one at the bottom, and that should do well enough for us. As usual, I don't want the tape to be at the very edge because I don't want it to show in the edge of the project. Okay, shiny and sticky is bad. One of these days I'll get this. Seriously. Man. Next 2-minute tool tip, how to take the back off of tape. Alright, so it just lines up with the very top of this thing. Very simple. I'm going to keep it as straight as possible on there. Okay? Now again, I'm only going to sew this top line, this bottom scalloped edge, and then around the handle. Alright, I don't have a ton of thread on this bobbin, so I may have to cut in the middle and do that. But I'm going to start at this end, I'm going to back stitch a couple of inches, then I'm going to go forward across this top here. So sorry if my shoulder's in the way while I hit the reverse lever with my elbow there. Okay. Going easy on my pedal, I don't think I bothered turning it on. There we go. Okay, now we're going to stitch it all the way across the top. Then when I get to the other end, I will also backstitch there. I'm using neutral color thread, natural colored thread here. You could use just a dark brown to kind of make it match everything else. I kind of like a contrasting stitch, so that's why I'm using the color I'm using. The biggest thing is, if you're a new sewer on a sewing machine, if you don't use a contrasting stitch, let's say you stitch down brown on brown, then any mistakes you make at not following your lines perfectly and stuff like that, they're not going to show as much. Same goes for, let's say you did stitch something and your stitching is just not pretty at all. Dye that crap dark, nobody will ever see it. A very talented leather worker that as she was learning, her tooling was beautiful, coloring was beautiful, stitching absolutely terrible, and it just showed out so bad. It just ruined the finished look of a project. And finally somebody gave her that tip, and until she learned to sew better, that helped her a lot. Okay, now I'm doing the bottom line, and again it's going to be a little bit crazier because I'm following my scallops. Going slow. This bag absolutely could be hand sewn very simply. There is not a ton of sewing, unlike the big bags that we've done in the past. But for the purpose of making this video and not taking all day to do it, I'm using a sewing machine. Anybody that knows me knows I prefer to hand stitch things. Honestly, I love hand stitching, but I think that's only because I actually have the option, There's plenty of folks don't have a sewing machine that are like, man, I'm done with this stuff. Now, when I'm sewing, one of my biggest goals is I want my turns down here in these scallops to be kind of right in the middle of that scallop. You don't want your turn to be before the point or after the point. You want it to be in the point. Okay, and that way it looks cleaner, it follows the line better. And then I'm also trying to make all of my turning movements while the needle is down in the leather, because that helps to keep my my stitch length consistent. Okay. Okay, all the way to the edge and backstitch. Now, depending on what leather you're making this bag out of, you may or may not want to skive these other edges before you do this. I'm probably not going to skive them because you can't really skive the hair on cowhide. And if you skive one side and not the other, then when you turn the bag right side out, it's not going to sit right. One side's going to try to be bigger than the other, I guess you could say. So anyway, I'm not going to skive this one. If you use anything, 5 ounces or less, nice and floppy, it'll be okay. You just want it to kind of match your cowhide as far as its rigidity and things like that. Okay, now I'm going to sew the exact same thing on this other one here. I'll fast forward the video while I do it, and then when I come back, we'll sew that inside part right there, the handle. What did I do with the smaller roll of tape? There it is. All right, so here we go. I'm going to do the exact same thing on this one. So I got that one sewed together. Okay, it's just like the first one. Now I'm going to sew around this handle. Now if you're using a sewing machine for this, highly advise that you do it this way, where the inside of the handle is on the inside of the machine. Okay, if I was going to sew it this way, I risk that side presser foot there falling into the handle and messing up. So I'm going to do it this way. I have an issue with my bobbin. I don't know what's going on, but it's super loose down there, so I need to stop right here and figure out what's going on with my sewing machine, and we'll be back. Alright, so what had happened is when I checked the bobbin last, when I put it back in, the thread was wrapped around it wrong, and it was not feeding correctly, so I had to pull all that thread out. Now I'm re-stitching in the same holes. What I do is every once in a while I just check and make sure I'm going right back into the holes that are already there. If it was a straight line stitch, it wouldn't be as much of an issue, but there can be a variation if I didn't turn it in time or whatever. So there we go. Now we should be good to go for the rest of these stitches. And then I'll just continue on like that never happened. Because that's what I like to do. I like to pretend like mistakes never happen. Okay. Out in the last corner here. Back to that first stitch again, and since we went all the way around this, we don't need to back stitch. We just need to go right back over the first stitch and sew back over the first couple one more time. One more again. There we go. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side, and then we're going to continue putting this back together. So So now I'm going to go back to my desk and I'm going to use a 7/8" hole punch to punch out those 2 round holes on the edges and then just cut between them with a scalpel to cut out these handles. Alright, I'm not going to move all the cameras and lights and everything because we're coming right back over here, but that's all I'm going to do is on both handles, 7/8" hole punch, or you can just carefully cut around, you know, what you've already got cut there, and then cut all that centerpiece out, and that way you have a nice handle. Okay? And then like over here where this stretched a little bit, I'm just going to trim that little bit off and just make sure everything matches up nicely. And when I come back, we're going to attach the 2 halves with the fringe in between. Alright, I'll move the camera around to the other side of the machine so that you can see more of what I'm doing here. I forgot to change my bobbin again. The one I put in a while ago was just a partial. So, leave that out so I'll remember to do that. All that fringy mess. Alright. This fringe still has tape on it, so it's sticking to each other. So now we're going to put the 2 halves together with the fringe in them. Okay? So, since I've got 1/2 that'll actually stick to it, I'm going to go ahead and do it first. However, I consider this to be the back of the bag. So if you only cut 1 layer of fringe, then you'll want it to where the back of it is up when you're looking at the back of the bag. Okay? Now, you can cut this exact piece again and then have 2 layers of them to where it would be like this, and you'd have tons of fringe first off, but then you'd also have kind of a finished fringe on both sides of the bag. Okay? So, and actually I'm wrong about this. You want your finished side up if you're looking at the back of the bag, because when we turn it inside out it'll flop over and that'll be the back. Hope that makes sense. So I'm going to put some more tape on this, because if I can get it to stick to one side, that's great. Again, the hair on side is not going to stick to very well, but that's okay. Alright, and then just to make sure that I'm not crazy here, I am going to kind of experiment. Lay it down, lay this one on it, and then when I turn it right side out, that'll be still backwards. So yeah, okay, I want to lay it to where it's finished side up. Okay, and I'm going to take the back off of it here, and I just want to line it up with the very top of that little L-shaped corner right there that we've cut out. Okay. Good and sticky. Now when I get down here to the corner, you can kind of wrap it down a little bit, roll it down, I guess you could say, and stick it down. Okay? Now, exact same thing, opposite side. The other longer piece of fringe. Okay, this is the wider one, it'll go across the bottom. And then you just want to take your fringe, just kind of fold it up to the middle there. Yeah. As I mentioned, I don't like dealing with fringe. Now, generally, I don't like using tape on bags. Anybody that's watched my bag videos, I've talked about it a million times. I don't like it. But I'm going to sew far enough in on this seam that this tape will never, ever, 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 ever happen to stick out. Okay? Take the cover off the tape. Poor Butters is laying on the floor over there like, Dad, are we done? It's Saturday. I want to go home. Play with the other dogs. She has no loyalty, realizing that she's the chosen one to get to come to the shop with me. Okay. Kind of like that. Okay, and again, we'll just kind of fold it up and out of the way. Now we got to put that bottom piece on. There's also something called peekaboo fringe, which would be where if I used a really thin piece of, let's say, kid skin or something like that, and I glued a different color to the back of it, and then cut all my fringe and everything, it makes a really neat look as well. Kind of a two-tone, of course, two-color look. But anyway, we'll save that for a future project, I reckon. Alright, so this one I'm just going to line up. I don't want it to overlap the other two pieces, because that'll make a big, like a big bubble in my bag, I guess you could say. Okay, so I don't want it to overlap. I just want to get it in there. And it's okay if we come to the end and we have to trim a little bit off so that they don't overlap. That's fine. I'd rather have too much than too little. Okay, and it looks like I'm going to cut about 5 strands off here so that it doesn't overlap. There. All right. Now, we're going to lay the other half of the bag. Oof, big old mess. Man, I hate this stuff. We're going to lay the other half of the bag right over the top of all this. And we're going to use clips to hold it all together. Okay? Now, one of the biggest things you want to make sure is that you're not sewing a tail of some of the fringe inside one of the seams. So you just want to be really careful as you stick it all together. And again, I'm going to hold it together with clips while I sew it. Okay? And again, I'm going to have a very wide seam on this, like a 3/8 inch or more seam allowance, and then I'm going to trim the edge after it's sewn, just to ensure that I don't have any of that tape showing when it's done. Okay? Well, we've got several layers and they move around because they're not laying flat against each other due to all that fringe in there. And so the wider seam allowance will ensure that we're going through all the layers and one of them doesn't slip underneath and not get sewn together. Skipped ahead up here so I can make sure the top of it matches up like it should, and then I'll clip back down to the bottom there, stretching as I need to make sure all the layers line up good. Soft, floppy, difficult to sew, but we'll get through it. Alright, I need to change out that bobbin one more time. This will be my last bobbin change, I promise. Looks like my bobbin winder got a little crazy on me, so I need to cut the loops off here. All right. Again, check, double check, feel around, look around, make sure that none of the ends of the fringe got down into that seam anywhere, and then we'll start to sew. Okay, and when I say I'm going to sew a wide seam allowance, you know where that little L shape is on top? I'm going to basically sew straight down this edge up here. And then when you turn it right side out, that's also kind of the right measurement for where you want the bag to set. Put my sewing machine down here. Go ahead and remove that first clip. I don't need it once I get this needle going. Okay, I'm going to start half an inch down or so. I'm going to back stitch, and then I'm going to go forward all the way around 3 sides of the bag. There we go. Again, big wide seam allowance. Not only is it going to help the making sure all the layers are there, but it's going to help with your fringe. Since we didn't cut it, you know, it doesn't go, the cuts for the fringe don't go all the way to the top or the edge. It'll help it lay better too. You don't want to see where the fringe goes to a solid piece of leather when you turn the bag right side out. It won't lay right. Okay. So steady as she goes, around on the corner. Like a straight line. Back to another corner. All the way to the finish line, and then I'm going to backstitch. There we go. Now this bag is ready to turn right side out. Drop my little scissors. There they are. Picked them back up. Just didn't know where I put them. Okay. So as I like to call it, the moment of truth. While you're turning it, actually no, I'm sorry, we're going to trim these edges. Grab a big pair of scissors. And I'm just going to cut some of that seam allowance out of here, okay? Making sure I'm not cutting my stitches, of course, on top or bottom, because that would suck. And especially down here in the corners, the closer you get to your seam, your actual stitch, the better those corners will turn when you turn it out. But again, if you cut a stitch, you're in trouble. It's quite the hand exercise going through these layers. I could have used the knife, but you know, I'm over here, not on the bench with a cutting board. Mess in the cook trash. Almost there. Okay, now I'm going to turn it right side out, and I want to be very careful not to pull it apart while I do that, okay? This is not a weak point up here, but it's not the strongest point either. So what I want to do is just kind of reach on the inside, grab a corner, and pull it through, and then carefully fold these top pieces back without putting stress on that top, the top of that seam. And it's hard because all that fringe in there is a lot of bulk, you know. There we go. Coming on out. Okay, and then you're going to take and just pull at the fringe a little bit to help get those edges out. But when I get down into the corners, if I can't do it with my fingers, I'll stick a blunt tool in there, whether it be a hammer handle or something like that, to really push it out and get it into that corner shape there. In this one, my hands happen to do it right apparently, but again, sometimes maybe that corner's really sharp or something like that on different projects, and I'll use a tool to help push it. Come on, buddy. There we go. All right, what do we got here? Ooh, a fringy bag, what do you know? All right, folks, we don't have a lot to go here. I'm gonna press down on these seams, push really hard so that it has a natural fold where it ought to. But the only other things I have to do to the body of this bag are sew in my loops with my D-rings for the shoulder attachment, and finish up these edges and the edges inside the handle here. So let me get my D-ring stuff together and I'll be back in just a moment. Alright folks, so I've got my 1-inch D-rings here, and I've got my my edges here, and I've got just a piece of like strap leather. It's about 5 ounce or so. I want something that's not stretchy, and all I'm going to do is take my D-ring, put it in there, put it right in the middle of this thing, okay, and I'm going to sew those sides together with that in between them, and it'll look just like that. Okay, and I'm going to do it on both sides. And I'll just sew from the top, back stitch first, all the way to the bottom, back stitch again, and there you go. That will be how I attach these D-rings. I almost messed up there. I need to finish that edge right fast first. Okay, I'm going to burnish it just like I did everything else. I'll trim it to make sure there's no hair sticking out of it or anything, and then I'll dye it and burnish it. I'll do the same on the other side there. Then when it's all done, I'll go ahead and do inside the handle and the tops right here. I can do those afterward because I can still pull them apart to get to them. Okay, so I'll be right back once I've got that done. Ah, got that done. Okay, so once again, I'm going to put this on the inside of that seam, sandwich it together, make sure everything's lined up really well, and stitch it. Okay, I'll start out with the back stitch and then go forward. And it doesn't matter how high or low you put that D-ring, it matters that they match on both sides. Okay, so I've got it about 2/3 from the top, I guess. Sometimes the sewing machine can be a little picky when we're going through a new layer here. It's not that it can't handle it, it just pushes it a little bit, and the needle doesn't want to go through quite as easily. It's pushing that needle into my needle plate underneath. Come on, buddy, find it. Alright, I'm gonna have to figure out what's going on because I've got some sort of blockage here. It's a bad day for the sewing machine apparently. Alright, so in leather work, as in life, not everything goes to plan, as usual, of course. So what I'm gonna do, this thing, it just was not, my sewing machine was not having it at all. I'm not really sure why. Like I said, I've sewn 2 of these up on that same machine doing the same way, but every once in a while things just don't want to cooperate. Could be because I hadn't eaten anything today and I'm starting to get hangry and the machine could feel it. So anyway, I'm not scared. So what I'm going to do is, all the holes are already here down to here. I'm going to hand sew all that back together with this in it, and then I'm going to just use my awl and go through my last few holes here and hand sew this whole thing together. Then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side, and it'll just be hand sewn, which means the benefit to that too is now the back of the stitch will look just as pretty as the front. So to be very honest, I should have just stopped and hand sewed it anyway, because this method of assembling this bag when you use a sewing machine can lead to that back side looking a little bit uglier, and we don't want any of it to be ugly. We want it to be reversibly pretty. So when I come back, these are going to be hand sewn, and that'll be it. We're just going to finish up some edges and be done. All right, so here we are. We straighten this camera a little bit. All right, we got that done. Got that all hand sewn. Took me a minute, but we got it. Now, again, I'm gonna burnish the insides of these handles and the tops of this just like I did the other parts, but I'm not gonna bother doing it on video because it takes forever and you don't have to watch that. So let's talk about the shoulder strap. The shoulder strap for this bag can be as simple or as fancy as you want it. My wife wanted a wider strap on hers, so I did a 1 3/4 inch wide strap, and I did the gunslinger pattern, sew pattern on it, and it looked really sharp. I've got a video on my YouTube channel on the gunslinger stitch line, if you want to look that up. But I'm just going to show you the basics here of just a standard 1 inch strap. Right over here in my office, all I have are these standard snap hooks. I would use one with a swivel on it as opposed to these. I know that's what we sent out in the mystery box, and yeah. So I'm gonna show you how I'll put one of those snaps on one end of this, and then you could measure it to fit how, you know, whatever person you're making this for, or make it even adjustable if you want to put a buckle in it or whatever. But I'm gonna bend that over there, and I'm just going to use a brass rivet with this thing so that it matches. Grab me a big old hole punch here. Butters is getting excited. She can tell I'm ready to wrap this up. Okay. Brass rivet here. Setting rivets, I like to use my big heavy piece of steel here. Where is my setter? Alright, let me pause this so I can find my daggum setter. Found it. I forgot I moved it from the drawer to an actual spot on the wall where it belongs. I'm going to set my setter down over my rivet to push that washer down. Okay, and then I'm going to use my my nippers and cut it. There we go. And I've got 2 choices from here. I can use my ball peen hammer and hammer it out, but here lately I've been using the doming tool that I hardly ever used to use. I've gotten to where I kind of like it. So it's just my little doming tool with a mallet. And it makes it pretty and round like a little button on there. Okay? So there you go. I would do that to both sides of this strap, making the strap as long as I wanted, so that it could either be a crossbody or a you know, just hang over one shoulder, or maybe you just want a little carry handle. It's one thing I've learned is you can't second guess how a lady wants a handbag. or a shoulder bag or a crossbody bag. So yeah, that's about it. So I'm Aaron Heiser, Maker's Leather Supply, and again, this was the Fringy Cowhide bag. Have a great day.